when we say nonlinear dynamics, that means nonlinear equations are governing the system, where the degree of the equation is greater than 1. Now, in the case of nonlinear system, now it can change to chaotic system under certain conditions. Now, the features of the chaotic system, it is highly sensitive to initial conditions, and even if we know the course of a system, that doesn't give you the course of the system if it is slightly changed for the initial conditions. That is the important characteristic of chaotic system. Now, chaotic system, this is usually quoted example. If the initial condition is slightly changed, in the course of the dynamics, it may diverge from the that is original path that is already known to us. That is at 15 iterations, they are highly different. They are following very different paths, but at 30 iterations, they are again coming to closer to each other. That means you cannot determine, you can determine it, but you cannot predict. Now, for the chaotic system to be present, all non-invertible maps will exhibit chaos. Invertible maps greater than dimension greater than 1, and second order autonomous systems, non-autonomous systems, and also higher order autonomous systems. Now, the essential condition for chaotic system to be present, for the nonlinear system to be chaotic, is there must be presence of nonlinear element, and also dimension must be greater than 3. This is an example where Rosler attractor, Rosler system phase space plot is drawn, where you can see a strange attractor. The course of the attractor is inside that volume, is confined to that volume. It can be seen that it is locally divergent, but globally converging. It will not go out of this volume, but you cannot predict the next course of the system or next phase space point. You have to determine it numerically. Now, thus, I have already stated that chaotic systems are having the characteristic properties of nonlinearity, complexity, unpredictability, deterministic, and sensitive dependence on initial conditions. Non-integrability also, you can numerically integrate it, but it cannot be analytically integrated. Now, examples of chaos, almost all the systems in nature are chaotic systems. Even simple pendulum will be converted into a chaotic system. We are approximating it as a linear equation as d square x by dt square plus omega square x equal to 0, where x is very small. If x is large, the equation will be changed to a nonlinear equation where d square x by dt square plus omega square sin x equal to 0. Sin x is a nonlinear element. When x is large, you cannot approximate that to x. When the forcing term is very high, you cannot predict whether it will go in circular motion or whether it will continue in its simple harmonic motion, or it will be a slacked motion like that. Now, we have already seen all these in literature, whether system is a chaotic system. Even a butterfly flapping may produce a storm somewhere else. And also, our heart does not beat twice in the same way. That means heart itself is beating as an irregular manner, or it is acting as a chaotic system. Now, coming to neurons. Now, we know the number of neurons in animals is enormous. Even fruit fly is having 100,000 neurons, and for elephant it is 257 billion neurons. In the case of human being, it is 100 billion neurons, and each neuron is connected to 10,000 other neurons. Now, the study of human nerve cells or neurons is very difficult because the number of neurons is very high and they are connected to each other. About 10,000 neurons are, 10,000 neurons are connected to each neuron. Now, in the case of brain function, you cannot explain it by means of spiking of a single neuron or individual neuron, or it cannot be explained as a part of local network, and it cannot be characterized by a single stimuli. The 5 sense organs and pressure, temperature, all these are inputs to the neurons, and all these will affect the neuron behavior. Now, the neuron, the detailed anatomy is already shown by Sajid sir. The neuron dimension is the nucleus is having dimension of about 5 to 100 microns, and axon is very long. That depends on the species. In the case of axon, it can be 1 millimeter to 100 millimeter or 1000 millimeter. That means it can be extended up to 1 meter. Now, there is node of Ranvier and axon terminal. All these are part of the structure of the neuron. Now, in the case of neuron, a neuron signal is represented by this, where at rest the neuron is having inside the nucleus, it is having a voltage of minus 70 millivolt, and that voltage is or potential is maintained by the diffusion of sodium and potassium ions and calcium chlorine ions as well. The sodium positive ions outside the cell is 10 times greater than that of the inside the membrane, and the potassium ion concentration, positive ions concentration is higher inside the neuron membrane, that is inside the nucleus. When a signal comes to the neuron, the voltage starts to increase, and when it normally there will be diffusion of sodium and potassium ions through the membrane, and when a signal comes to that, the voltage starts to increase and becomes minus 55 millivolt. At this stage, the voltage gated channels of sodium positive ions will be opened, and sodium ions will be going into the cell, and the potential again crosses 0 and reaches up to plus 30 millivolt. As it becomes plus 30 millivolt, potassium channels inside the membrane gets opened, and that reduces the potential inside, and that causes repolarization. Now, at minus 55 millivolt, potassium gates gets closed, and due to the delay in closing of the potassium channels, the voltage goes below minus 70 millivolt, and that phase is known as hyperpolarization. Now, during this 30 millivolt to minus 55 millivolt, no other spikes are produced, or there is no production of other spikes between the period from plus 30 millivolt to minus 55 millivolt. You can call that as absolute refractory period. Now, this is already explained. Now, we have already seen synapse in the morning talk by Sajid sir. Synapse is a small structure having very small dimension, 0.1 to 0.2 micrometers, and that permits neuron to communicate with other neurons. There are two types of synapses. One is electrical synapse, and it can be also chemical synapse. Electrical synapse is two-way, bidirectional, and that is fast and instantaneous. There is no gain or modification of signal occur in the postsynaptic neuron. But in the case of chemical synapse, that is by means of chemical substances, and it is only unidirectional. It can change the spiking pattern of the postsynaptic neuron, and it is relatively slow. Modification of signals occur in the case of chemical synapse. Now, these are the different dynamics of a neuron. A neuron can spike regularly, or any input DC current may cause a spike and after that it will be at rest, or it may give a burst of spiking at regular intervals, and that is tonic bursting. And phasic bursting, first of all there will be a bursting and after that it will be at rest, and all the others are explained, well explained by the figure itself. Now there are three types of neurons, that is sensory neurons, they are receiving signals from the sense organs. Motor neurons are receiving signals from the spinal cord and that are communicating to moving parts of the body. And interneurons are acting as transmitters between sensory neuron and motor neuron. The size of the neuron in each case is different. Now the neurons are, the spatiotemporal activities of neurons are taking part in cognitive process, visual object detection, memory formation, seizures, all these are known to us. Now that depends on the frequency of the brain waves. If the brain wave frequency is between 0.1 to 4 Hz, you can call it as delta waves, and that represents deep sleep or unconscious state. Theta waves are having frequency between 4 to 8 Hz, rapid eye movement state, which is in sleep itself, sleep or deep meditation state. Alpha waves are having frequency between 8 and 12 Hz, that is relaxed or drowsy state. Beta waves are represented by the alert state, and gamma waves are representing concentration, cognitive process, ecstasy, etc. Now neurons when coupled, their dynamics is entirely different from that of the behavior of a single neuron. When they are coupled, there may be synchronization, amplitude death, and also oscillation death, and near death spikes may also arise. Another interesting part is a neuron which is non-chaotic may change into chaotic when just put into the network. Now synchronization of chaotic systems, that is neurons can be synchronized, their two or more neurons may adjust their property to a common value, and that is representing synchronization. The activities of neuron depends on, as we all know, coupling strength, network topology, network size, type of neuron, noise, electric fields, etc. Now there are different neuron models, we have already seen some of them in the morning presentations. Integrate and fire model, that is represented by only a single equation, but it does not produce all the firing models of neurons. Hodgkin-Huxley model is having 4 equations, so it is time consuming or it costs more for the computations. Ishkevich model is having 2 equations, but at the same time it is producing all the spiking patterns of the neuron, and all other neuron models are also there in the literature, and there are merits and demerits for these models. Now in our case we will examine, we have examined spatiotemporal activities of a pulse coupled biological neural network. Pulse coupled means the neurons are communicating with each other by means of pulses instead of continuous waves. Now the network that we have chosen is, this is the published work in 2019. The example is that we have chosen is that of a network of neural network of C. elegans. C. elegans is a soil worm having size of 1.5 to 2 millimeter, and it has a total of 302 neurons, and its connectome is well defined. You can examine the neurons using the electron microscope, because electron microscope can observe a range of nanometers, and the neurons are having size of micrometers. And this soil worm is having a size of about 1.5 millimeter to 2 millimeter. This is the first multicellular organism with complete connectome identified. Nervous system consists of both chemical synapses and also electrical synapses or gap junctions. and it consists of modular arrangement of network, and the genome is 35% is similar to that of humans. That is why it is the study of elegance is interesting. Now the local, we are examining only 131 frontal neurons, and the adjacency matrix is already given in literature, that is already observed by the electron microscopes, and the adjacency matrix is defined like this. They are connected by means of, by this way. So we will find, we have found out the spatial temporal activities of C. elegans. Now we will examine the contributions of individual neurons and influence of chaotic neurons. The model that we have chosen is IQAC model of neuron. It consists, I have already stated that it consists of two equations. One is giving the membrane potential, and there is a recovery variable, that is K, where the inactivation of potassium positive ions and inactivation of sodium positive ionic currents takes place, so that a negative feedback is occurring. After 30 millivolt, the membrane potential and recovery variable will be adjusting according to this equation. Now A, B, C, D are given different values, such that the neuron spiking is nonlinear or chaotic, and at certain values of A, B, C, D, the neuron behavior becomes non-chaotic. Now these are the parameters. For interneurons, you can choose A, B, C, D values like this, and for other neurons the values are chosen like this, and for chaotic neurons, the neurons become chaotic if the parameters are changed to this value in the equations. Now this is the current that is put into each neuron, since each neuron is connected to other neurons, and this adjacency matrix will be taking care of that feedback from other neurons. G synchronization is the total conductance of the synapse. That is, if the G synchronization is higher, there is more coupling between the neurons. Now we have studied the key features are that is this PCNN, pulse coupled neural network, can be used to model and analyze neural encoding. And advantages it is realistic model of neural behavior, and it is suitable for large scale simulations. Now what we examine here is average firing rate. We have chosen only 131 neurons. There are 302 neurons in that soil worm, and we will examine also the bursting synchronization and entropy. Average firing rate is having this usual equation. It is the firing rate of each neuron divided by the n number of neurons. Bursting synchronization will give the synchronization rate. If B is equal to 1, it is synchronously bursting. All the spikes are at regular intervals, and if B equal to 0, it is representing asynchronous behavior. H is named as entropy, but it will give you the information, amount of information in the network. Now when we examine the average firing rate, as the synaptic conductance G synchronized, that is conductance coupling between two neurons is increased, the firing rate first of all decreases and then increases. And similarly for average feedback current received from the network will be behaving, or it shows this behavior. And in the case of non-chaotic neurons, the spiking of each neuron is as shown in these graphs. But when the neurons are converted into chaotic, or when the parameters are chosen such that they are behaving as chaotic neurons, their spiking pattern changes in this manner. That is, when G synchronization is 5 or 10, that 10 or 5, both of them are having similar behavior. When the coupling constant is higher, that is when the communication between the neurons is higher, there is stopping of spiking by the neurons. After certain time, the neuron stops their spiking. And before they stop the spiking, there will be a surge of spikes. Just before it stops spiking, a number of spikes comes very close to each other, or the activity becomes so high just before they stop firing. So it is known as near-death surges. And that is very interesting. And this near-death surges is due to lack of oxygen in the brain, and most of the neurons lose their sodium potassium potential, and also that is responsible for rise in electrical activity, and that causes a surge in EEG. Now firing rate, when we examine that, it depends on the number of chaotic neurons. As the chaotic neurons number is very low, see that firing rate is very high. That means when the synaptic conductance is very high, that is about 9 to 10, and also when the number of chaotic neurons is small, see the red region. That red region is representing higher frequency, that is 15. That means if the number of neurons is less, the frequency of spiking is higher, and that is representing beta waves that we have already seen earlier in earlier slide. And as the chaotic neuron number is increasing, the spiking rate reduces to 7. That means the network changes to alpha oscillations, which is representing and that is drowsy state. That means if the number of neurons which are chaotic, if it is reduced, you will be having alert state, and at the same time if you increase the number of chaotic neurons in the network, then it will be changing to drowsy state. And that is an important result that we have attained, and it is also depending on the conductance between the two neurons or different neurons. As the conductance increases, it changes to beta waves. As the conductance is less, it will be giving us low frequency spiking. That is already explained. In the case of chaotic neurons, alpha waves are more dominant, and that is representing drowsy state. For higher coupling, it will be representing beta waves, and that is representing alert state, which is indicating conscious state of mind, logical thinking, memory activation, etc. Now regarding the bursting synchronization is generally independent of coupling between the two neurons. As the chaotic neurons number is increased, the synchronization increases. That is an interesting behavior. As the number of chaotic neurons are higher, synchronization is increased. And entropy is giving us the information that is entropy is giving us the information stored in the network. As the number of chaotic neurons are increased, entropy is also increasing, and that is independent of the conductance between the neurons. Now these are the observations that I have already explained, those observations. Now if there is an overactive brain, some of the neurons can be made chaotic so that the activity can be soothed, so that beta waves can be converted into alpha waves. Now strong coupling improves firing rate and entropy, and network activity is independent of coupling strength. and near-death experiences are that is important to be examined. Experimental studies are to be performed before its use in the treatment of diseases like stress, over anxiety, ADHD and Alzheimer's disease like that. Now we have seen all the three measures. First decreases, that is three measures means entropy and bursting synchronization, firing rate. All these first decreases with synaptic conductance and then increases. And alpha oscillations are displayed by the chaotic network, and near death surges are also characteristic of chaotic neurons. All this I have already explained. Now thank you. These are the future projections, that is you can elaborate the work to all the 302 neurons of the C. elegans, and also mean field approximation can be implemented. We have already studied the same C. elegans network, neural network with the introduction of Levy noise, and in that case also there is more probability of near death surges. Thank you.